Alright, let's carry on. Before we proceed with this video, I have to confess I was in two minds about creating this particular section because for some students it might be a little bit confusing, but then I decided what the heck, I'm gonna share it with you anyway. Consider this as a sneak peek into the more advanced courses. What you're going to be learning in this video is how you create a backdoor, and that backdoor is going to give you a meterpreter shell that you are going to be handling or catching with METASPLOIT. So instead of just a normal regular netcat shell, you're going to get the more advanced meterpreter shell. Now I have to say that having learned what we've discussed so far, you should be familiar with all of the things that I'm going to be explaining, and you should find yourself comfortable with what I'm presenting to you guys. But if for whatever reason you find the topic a little bit too complex, then don't worry too much about it. When you decide to take the more advanced courses, we will be covering this topic again from different angles. Alright, so let's carry on. What I'm about to do is that I'm going to be creating a Linux executable file that is going to allow me to use the meterpreter shell. And to do that, I'm going to use a script called MSF-PC. And that stands for the MSF Venom, or the Metasploit Venom, payload creator. MSF Venom is a tool that we use to create Metasploit payloads. And like I said, in the advanced courses, we'll be discussing this tool in a lot of details. But for now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using this tool, which is called MSF-PC, which works with MSF Venom, but makes it a lot more easier to handle or deal with. And slightly prettier as well. So if I use it with the -H option for help, you'll see that these are all the types of payloads that I can create or generate. So I can create payloads that can infect Windows machines using exe files, or PowerShell, or Linux ELF, which are the Linux executable files, and so on and so forth. And to do that, I need to run the command with certain parameters. So I'm just going to copy all of this, paste it here, and then I'm going to be filling out these parameters one by one. And the first thing that I want to fill out is on what protocol do I want the communication to happen? Do I want it to be on HTTP, HTTPS, or just pure TCP? I'm going to stick with TCP to emulate what we've done with netcat. And then optionally, I can choose whether I want this to be staged or stageless. Without going into too many details, a stageless payload is a payload that you can think of it as self-sufficient. So it runs itself, executes itself, and within it, it has all the functionality that I need. A staged payload, on the other hand, is a payload that is divided into more than one part. The first part will execute and then will go and fetch another part. I'm going to delete this because for now I don't want you to worry about that. However, what I want you to worry about is whether I want this to be a bind or a reverse shell. We know already by now the difference between these two, and like we said before, preferably we want to be going with reverse shell pretty much all the time. So I'm going to stick to reverse, and then I need to choose whether I want this to be a Metasploit payload or I want it to be a command that I want to execute. I can choose the command option and then decide what command I want to run, or I can go with the Metasploit payload that will give me the meterpreter shell and that will give me more functionality. So I'm going to stick with the MSF. And then obviously I need to choose the port. In this case, I'm just going to put 4444. Then I need to complete the IP address. In this case, it's going to be my Kali IP address because it's a reverse shell. And last but not least, I need to decide what is the type of the payload that I want to generate. In other words, what system am I running this on, or what application am I running this on? I want this to be a Linux payload, so I'm just going to type Linux. Now that I have finished setting up all my options, I'll hit the enter key and I'll let the tool do its magic. Now as you can see here, this is what the original command, if I were using MSF Venom, would have been. So this is the entire command that I would have had to write. However, because I'm using this wrapper around MSF Venom, it did all this work for me. And it created, like we see here, this file that ends with ELF, which is the Linux executable file. But not only that, the cool thing about this tool is that it also creates a Metasploit script that when I run, it will launch Metasploit for me with all the parameters and the options already set within it. And it tells me exactly how do I need to run this script. So all I have to do now is do a copy, go to another terminal and paste the command. Just so you would know what this command does, it's going to run Metasploit and in the background is going to set up the Metasploit handler. which is a piece of Metasploit that is going to be handling the incoming connection from the reverse shell. Pretty much like we did the netcat in listening mode when we were doing the reverse shell. So if you remember, we set up netcat on our machine to listen for any inbound connections to us on the Kali machine. And then when we did our thing on the target system, it sent us a shell that we were able to catch using netcat because we had it set up on Kali, waiting and listening. And this is what we're doing here, but using Metasploit. We're using the handler, which is now sitting and listening in the background and waiting for a connection that's going to be coming from the interpreter payload. Now, of course, what I need to do is I need to upload this executable file and then run it on the Linux system. And to do that, I'm going to be introducing you to another web application vulnerability, just for the fun of it, so we can change a little bit. And we're going to be looking at the command execution. The command execution vulnerability, just like the name says, will allow you to run and execute commands on the target system. So without us having to upload a PHP shell in this case, we can immediately run commands on the system. Now you see these things in applications that allow you to do, for example, a ping on other systems, or that allow you to do certain tasks in the background that are then displayed on the front end of the web page or the website. If these functions are misconfigured, you might be able to combine commands together. Normally, these functions will be restricted to what commands you can run. So let's say, for example, there's a website that allows you to ping other websites to check connectivity. This website ideally should be restricted to allowing you to run only the ping command and nothing else but the ping command. However, if it was misconfigured, you might be able to run more than one command together, thus giving you unintentional access to more functionality on the underlying operating system. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this website says you have a free ping utility. And if you Google this, by the way, you will see other websites that do offer this functionality. So if I put any IP address and I hit the submit button, I should be able to see the ping output, whether I get a reply or not. But what if I try to join this with another command and I do the IP address and which says and run another command, which is the pwd in this case. And as you can see in the output, I get the running directory, which is the /var/www and so on. So I can successfully run more than one command, which is great news for me as somebody who's trying to attack the system. So what else can I do then? Maybe I can find out if they have wget running on the system. And to do that, I'm going to do and wget -h and hit the submit key. And luckily for me, wget is present because I can see the help output of wget. So now all I need to do is use wget to connect to my Kali and download this ELF file. And then I'm going to run this ELF file. Now before I do that, obviously, I need to set up my Kali machine as a web server and put the ELF file in the web directory so I can wget it from the target file. And this is what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to copy the ELF file and put it under the var/www/html, and I'm going to change the name to make it easier for me to copy later on to backdoor.elf. And I'm going then to start the Apache server, which has just converted my Kali machine into a web server. So now my Kali has a web server running on it, and on this web server, I have the backdoor.elf file sitting there. I'm going to go back to the Metasploitable, and I'm going to use the wget command to fetch this file from my Kali machine. And to do that, as we've seen before, we do wget http, the IP address of my Kali, and the name of the file, and hit the submit key. Let me verify that the download has succeeded. I'll do the ls command, and here we go. Awesome, I managed to download the file from my Kali onto the Metasploitable machine. Now all I need to do is run this, and hopefully I will get my shell back. Of course, before I run this, I need to change it to an executable file. And we've seen how you do that using the chmod command. So I'm going to do chmod +x backdoor.elf. And now if I do ls-al, I should see the x next to the backdoor file. And the last step now is to just run it. And to do that, we do and the name of the file. Now we go back to the Metasploitable window and look at this. We see that the Meterpreter session is open and the session number is 1. To interact with the session, I type sessions -i for interact and the number of the session. Oops, I hit enter a little bit too quickly. So I'm going to just repeat the command with the number 1. And here we go. I have now a Meterpreter shell that's allowing me to interact with the Metasploitable system. So if I type sysinfo, I get the information of the system, get UID, I get the information of the user, and if I want to drop myself into the native Linux shell to run Linux commands, I type shell, and then I can run things such as who am I, and so on. So there you have it. This is how you can create a backdoor that gives you a Meterpreter shell and how you can catch this shell using your Metasploit framework. Now, obviously here, to be able to take advantage of this, I had to exploit a web application vulnerability, download the executable to the machine, and then run it on the machine. And that was just one way to do it. I could have uploaded it in other ways, or I could have sent it to a user and tried to trick the user into running this executable, and so on and so forth. The possibilities are endless. You can imagine what you can do with this. Before we move on to the next section, if you found this section a little bit confusing, don't worry too much about it. Make sure that you understand the previous sections about the bind shell and the reverse shell, because these sections are very important. This section, however, was just a small quick bonus that I wanted to share with you. And like I said, we will be covering this topic in a lot more details in the more advanced courses. Alright, once you're ready, let's move on to the next section.